Okay, guys, welcome back. So I've put the question, the task in the on the code. We're now in VS Code, so we can see that. So essentially, write a program that stores a random number between 1 and 10. The user has to guess the random number, and the program should loop until they get it right. Once the user has guessed the correct number, congratulate them and end the program. All right. So I am going to, we haven't done this before, but I'm going to do something import. All right. So as you can see, it turned blue. This is a keyword in Python and random. So I am going to import a library, all right? A built-in library from Python that will allow me to simulate random processes, okay? And we'll get to this later in more advanced videos, right? So I'm going to create a random number between 1 and 10, which is inclusive, right? So 1 is there and 10 are there. So I'm gonna call it random number, random number. And I'm going to say, I'm going to use the random function, and I'm going to use the random library rather, and I'm going to use a randint function, and I'm going to get the range, return a random integer in range A and B, including both endpoints, right? So essentially what this is going to do is going to return a random integer between 1 and 10, including 1 and 10, right? Then what I'm going to do is now ask the user for a random number. And how do we collect user inputs, right? We're going to use the input function, right? I'm going to say input, going to give a prompt, guess a number between 1 and 10, right? And then I'm going to escape it so that it shows on a new line, the input. So is that the way we do it? Now remember that this will return a string. If you look there, this returns a string. And how do we change, but we want an integer. So how do we change this string to an integer? Remember from the previous videos, we use the int function, right? So we type casting from string to integer, all right? So then now so now I want to check whether what the user entered into the terminal line is equals to or is the same as the random number. Now I could use an if statement, right? And say if random number is equals to, remember, that's how you do equals to, the user guess, right? Print, well done. Right, now this is fine. However, this will not solve our problem, right? Because the problem says the program should loop until they get it right, right? And remember, the if function only executes just once, right? So what do we do then? All right, there comes the while loop. The while loop will check a condition, and if that condition is true, if that condition is true, it will just continue executing until that condition is false. All right, so what true condition? So what I will now do is I will say while random number that we just generated is not equals to the user guess, right? So if this is not equals to this, right, then that will return a true, right? Okay. So what do we do when that happens? It says the user has to guess, right, until they get it right. So we can just say, actually, sorry, mate, you didn't get the right thing. So try again, right? Try again. And then we will ask them to try put in another number, right? Okay, so this essentially this while structure. So if they don't get it right, this will continuously run. It will be like an infinite loop. Fortunately, we only have 9 values between this range, right? So it's not going to be too long until they get the correct answer. If it's between like 1 and 1 million, then wow, they could be there for the whole day or even longer. Okay, but fortunately, it's not too long. So if they guess the right number, then this becomes false. Then it no longer executes this code. It'll move to the next code that it sees. If there's nothing there, the program will end. But if it's something there, it'll execute the next line. So if they do guess the right number and they move to line 17, I'm going to say, I'm going to use an F string. Remember, we've used the F string before. Well done. You guessed correctly. And I'm just going to put what they put in user guess, right? So separation there, and then great. So let us execute. We do that by saying Python loops.py. Guess a number between 1 and 10. I say 1. Okay, try again. So I have to try it. Okay, I'll say 5. Try again. I'll say 6. Well done. I guess correctly. It took me 3 tries. All right. So that's how a while loop would work, right? So, okay, let's continue with the slides. Okay, now we've done the while loop, right? We've done the while loop. Now the next construct for looping in Python is the for loop, right? So how the for loop works essentially is you have a number, it's essentially executes for a specified number of times, right? Remember, in the while loop, this while loop will execute until a condition is met. You don't necessarily specify the number of times it will run. It will just run until the condition that it's checking is met. However, in the for loop, we specify how long we want to execute this loop. All right. So the structure is for I in a sequence of items, which is very important. It has to have a sequence. It's a sequence type where it can have that next element, and then it will enter and it will do something, and it will do something for a number of times. So now if you move to let's look at this flow chart here. It's going to start. It's going to say for each element in iterables. Iterables is essentially a sequence of items. Does this thing have the next element? So in a sequence of items, you have next, 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 next. And when you get to the end, there will no longer be any next. You can't go, you've got to the end. There's nothing next, right? Remember when you're on a web page and you're scrolling and you're paging from 1, 2, 3, 4, then you see lost or the option to click to the next page will gray out. So essentially this is how that kind of works as well. So if it does, that means we're not at the end. So we execute so we do something, loop body, then we go again, check again. And if it no longer has that next element, we end the for loop, right? So that is how the for loop works, right? So we'll get into some exercises in next. All right, cool. See you there.